Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sheriff Video Experience. We have an awesome episode today.
Today we have a special guest who is an Emmy award-winning media advisor who helps clients leverage their media exposure and fame and make impact. He is also the editor-in-chief of I Have a Podcast Show and is responsible for discovering and amplifying the voice of independent podcasters worldwide. He was also a network executive at MTV. So my show is very privileged to bring a guest who is a very impactful person in this way of branding. So let's welcome Mr. Vinnie.
Thanks, man. Thank you, Sharaf, for having me. I appreciate the space to connect here, bud.
So, Vinnie, just tell me how everything started. Just briefly tell about you.
The abridged version. You know, I didn't know anybody in the entertainment industry. I had no family that worked in media. I didn't know anyone who worked in media. I didn't know anyone in front of the camera, behind the camera. I didn't know a single person in the room. I didn't intern at a place to get a job. I didn't even know that being a creative entrepreneur would actually be a career and something that I can do in the future, to be honest. I just took a guess, to be blunt. I took a guess and a gamble. And I said, I'm really good at creatively connecting with people, and I'm going to stick to that. And I built a career on creatively connecting people. In the late 90s, it was done in databases with companies and people and casting calls. And then that turned into an opportunity to work at MTV Networks, where I got to help create a lot of reality TV programming and work with a lot of names that we're pretty familiar with globally, like the Osbournes or Jessica Simpson, Ashton Kutcher. I got to work with Diddy. Got to work with so many cool storytellers who got their messages put in front of the audiences that were watching TV. And I was one of the people at the TV network that helped talent figure out how to leverage their story. And I do the same thing now for business owners. I believe that we have the power to make changes that big companies don't. I know because I worked in media on both sides of the say both sides of the aisle, but both sides of the both sides of the market, let's just say. Actually, I think there's three sides to the media market. I think there's a mass media market, which is the publicly owned market. A lot of those networks are on the stock exchange. I think there's a social audio and a social media, or that's centralized and decentralized social. And then I think there's our private content, our podcasts and our newsletters and the things that we personally own, the intellectual property that we own. And it's leveraging one into either of those two spaces that I found is really what helps people get discovered, be more discoverable. And there was no one I worked with in television whose career goal it was to be on TV. It wasn't until the Housewives at Bravo where people started talking about being on a show like it was a job, and they forever changed, my experience working in reality TV. So lucky to have gotten a start in my career at a network like MTV that was growing globally, and I got to work on many different networks and many different iterations and affiliations of MTV, and helped scale what talent development could be. And I think that turned into the Real People economy, and then that turned into the influencer economy, and I think we're currently calling it the creator economy. So it's been fun to see the ramifications of possibilities between us, and I got to explore that at MTV when it mattered, when youth culture was watching television and taking action. So I don't take that lightly. And you, tell me a little bit about yourself. What is it about this podcast that we're going to get to share about that makes impact? And then, did you watch any of my shows?
Actually, recently just saw the glimpse of your, but I read a lot of articles
My
about
TV
you.
shows, not the podcast shows. Thanks.
But actually, what we do is actually I run a digital marketing agency. I just saw the problem of people not using the digital space much in India. It was a problem for me, so I just went in search of a solution, and that solution is now being transferred to other businesses. It might help other people. That's how I just started my digital marketing agency. This show is actually, I wish to bring a lot of pioneers in the digital marketing, branding, and the media space, so that people can know how to showcase their business in a world forum. So that is the impact which we are trying to give through this podcast show.
Yeah, I feel it. Well, congrats on this and on the success and the growth of what you're creating. It's funny you talk about the digital space, right? So much of discovery happens digitally, whether we're going to Google or Bing or Yahoo or searching on Instagram or LinkedIn and I realized that there was a gap between, especially as a creator, there's a gap between what I'm doing, what it takes to get these episodes, these podcast episodes out into the world. There's a gap between what I'm doing and what data says has been done. And I realized that there's this platform called IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, imdb.com.
Yeah.
You go there to look for like your favorite actor. You want to see what movies your favorite actors were in, or who directed or who wrote a film, or who were the people or vendors that worked on a TV or a film. And a couple of years ago, IMDb, Amazon owns IMDb, and Amazon approved podcasts as an intellectual property that can be credited on IMDb, which is pretty cool. So if you own a podcast, you have the ability to upload the title of your podcast and actually get credit as an executive producer, as a host. As of the end of 2022, they just added a brand new job category called podcaster, which is really exciting to me. I think that signals, I think every data point has a purpose. I imagine if I know that by creating a book and launching a book on Amazon, that's going to generate a Google knowledge panel for people, because Amazon is a solid, verified source of information. And Amazon says that you are an author, and authors get knowledge panels on Google. So I know to get you a knowledge panel on Google, you have to launch. Now, there are many, many ways to get a knowledge panel, but I know that if you launch a book, whether it's an ebook or a hardcover, softcover book through Amazon, that you will end up being identified as an author. And that is one of the things that triggers you getting a knowledge panel. And the knowledge panel is, when you're looking at Google, it's that bar on the right side of the screen that shows up that has additional information about you. It says that Google knows who you're searching for. It not only has information about them, but it's identified who they are, and it's vetted the information in the sources and connects you to certain moves. IMDb has this podcaster feature, which to me signals that there could be a snippet. So when we're looking at our search engine results, we'll notice that Google has like these little categories, sometimes of content. Sometimes it's like a little square with my Twitter content in it, or sometimes it's blog posts that I'm a part of, or news or songs if I'm a songwriter. So I think in the future there could be a podcaster snippet that would be really valuable. Imagine if you search for me on Google, Vinnie Potestivo, and then my podcaster snippet pops up, which shows you the most relevant, the most recent or relevant, who knows, episodes. And it's going to be a fight for traffic. Amazon would have placement there because it's probably trying to compete against Spotify or Apple or Google or some of the other places that my podcast, good pods, that where I know that my podcast is being played. So by uploading your podcast to IMDb, it actually creates like an infinite amount of link backs. It gives you the ability to create a data point between who your guests are on the episodes, how many episodes you've created, how many awards you've won or have been nominated for, who else works on your podcast, who else are your designers or your editors or any of the people that have jobs that connect with your output. Or if you do all of those, then you get those. It's not, you get all that credit and you get to claim those roles. You know, we watch movies that are written and directed by the same person. This is the same mentality. This is the same idea behind getting credits. And as creators, we believe in getting credits. There's a big fight right now against the AI community in art because AI learned a lot of its data points based on artwork that it didn't have the rights to commercialize in a way that it did. So there's a lot of pushback right now, especially about that one. You know, we won't remember by the time we won't have remembered the name of the app by the time this comes out because everything happens so quickly. But right, it's all about standing out. So if you're a podcaster and you have the ability to go to imdb.com, imdb.com, the Internet Movie Database, and upload your podcast, it's a great way to stand out. And the best thing about it is that if you have guests who are doing TV appearances or doing other things that become relevant in the future, that it becomes a launching point and a discovery point for you, that people can see that person and scroll down on their IMDb profile page and see what podcast they've been on. And in searching the podcast they've been on, there's an opportunity for my show to get discovered. And that's an evergreen way to make a connection and a data point that does not exist anywhere else that I know of as of right now in the entire dataverse, except for IMDb. And if you're creating content for social media, if you've been creating short form, long form content based on the podcast episodes that you're doing, you have a lot of video or even old photos now that, you know, no one wants to post photos on Instagram anymore. I've got a great platform called imdb.com for you to upload an infinite amount of content that supports so I can't listen to the podcast, but all of your artwork and videos and photos and promo, all of that can go up to IMDb, and that's going to have a big impact in your Google search results, your Bing search results, your Yahoo search results. And I'm just really mindful of giving out information about discovery, being really mindful that right now we have a very Google mindset. You know, Google certainly is like the beast to when it comes to discoverability. Now there will be a point in time where that changes. Also, I'd like to point out that, you know, Google gives you the version of information that you're looking for that most benefits Google. So you may want to call me. So you want my phone number. So you come to my site to get my phone number. But what Google does is it scrubs my site. It gets my phone number and it tells you my phone number without you needing to go to my site. And what could have happened if you came to my site is realize that you don't need my phone number. You can actually get the coaching and get the information that you want right away, right at your fingertips. But because Google doesn't want you to go to my website and transact with my website, it wants to be the person who discovers me. This is Google. Google is the person who always raises the hand in class. I know the answer. And they're always right. But they're usually right. You know, they're usually very smart. But I know the answer. And it doesn't let the opportunity for conversation happen. So this is why I like pointing out this IMDb hack, I guess we can call it for now, because there's an opportunity for podcasters to stand out. And that's what makes it a hack, is the time. It's been around a while, but I'm not seeing a lot of podcasters jumping on this. I don't even want to call it a trend, but on this right to get and give credits to the people who are helping them build intellectual property. It's a big opportunity for us.
Actually, that was very, very, very informative, and I didn't know that IMDb is hosting podcasts like this, and it was like, I think 2023 we need to focus on how to rank on IMDb. and
Yeah, absolutely.
we need to put
You,
a
you
lot of
know,
content on.
because right now we're connecting with podcast. Most of us connect with a podcast through a centralized podcast directory. So most of us are listening on Spotify or, Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or, some of the larger ones, even just globally. And I think that the future of podcasting is actually in the distribution. I think that podcasting is like a narrowcast, RSS means really simple syndication. So imagine it's a simple cast. It's a tiny little thread. Now, broadcast TV, I work in television and big networks. Broadcast television gets signaled out to a broader amount of people. So we know that the signal is bigger and wider because it hits more people. So it takes a big and wide signal to be able to hit that level of people, regardless of what the content is. It's the amount of people. That's where the bandwidth comes from. So if you were to do the same thing and apply that technique to our podcasts, if you were to take our podcast and let our podcast sort of infiltrate television, here's what I think we're talking about. I think we're talking about ESPN2 being the place for all things sports. Imagine what the ESPN2 podcast directory would look like. It wouldn't be podcasts that they produce. It would just be a directory that helps other people find maybe like-minded content. I can see how lifestyle networks, TV show networks, Bravo, the housewives of all the housewives of all these shows, I can imagine a point where Bravo has a lifestyle podcast directory where you can go to watch all the people who create content in podcasting about the broadcast content. So they're amplifying the voice of the core piece of content. I can also see in the future where our favorite drugstores and grocery stores have podcast directories. I mean, think about it. These are, when you're grocery shopping, what better way to have, the right mindset to purchase and interact, and also for them to control or maybe have input in the advertising for podcasters. So I think that if you're holding on to intellectual property, you'd be able to do, and there's a point where, I come from TV. There's a point where, like, if you did one of those, you get a contract and you're only allowed to do one. I think that the power of podcaster is so strong that there will be a time where we can do all of that. And we have so much more leverage, especially, and that point in time is now, by the way, just to be very clear, because of there is a boom in podcasting, but there is not a boom in long form content with a relationship between provider where there's more content coming. That's where podcasters stand to win, is not necessarily in what they have accomplished, but what they can accomplish in the future. And that's where distribution is really going to help. That's having relationships with people, brands, partners, collaborators that help us expand our reach more so than make us record more, because it's not about visibility. If you want more discoverability, it isn't about increasing visibility. It's about increasing shareability. I don't want you to be everywhere. I want people talking about you everywhere. If you're everywhere, then people will think that everyone has access to you. They will have no ego in bringing your name up because it won't serve them for you to be successful, because you already have a connection with said person or energy. So there's a fear of, well, what do I get out of it by telling this person about so and so? What do I get out of it if they already have access to it? I have everything to lose. I have nothing to win here. Before, I had everything to win because you weren't aware of that person. There's an ego that feeds off of discovery. And the last thing you should do is give it more visibility. That's going to oversaturation. That's when it sounds like this. Oh man, that person again, that song again. No, not that movie. It means that we no longer have people to share it with in our lives. And there's some part of it that's a shame, because, I'm also pointing out that means they get more value outside of that content than inside of it, right? That they should be so gracious to like something so much that they can be grateful just to have it in front of them and for it to be themselves, for it to feed their own curiosities and inspirations. But the ego wants to share. The ego wants to share. When it's hurt, that's grief. Grief is meant to be shared. The ego wants to share. This is something that is, built in pride. The ego wants to share, and pride is the piece, I think, that feeds discoverability when you're talking about the virality of sharing. So just geeking out here in the universe of how I think it, the recipe for success, so to speak.
That was very in-depth answer for how to be more memorable, and the latest strategies to use to get more like shareability. So visibility and shareability, you have given a very good difference, and that's like people always think we should be on all platforms and we should talk to everyone and just like producing content. But as you say, each and every piece of content should be shareable so that people will be talking about us rather than just seeing our content everywhere. That was very much insightful.
It's just one of the healthy boundaries that I've had to put into place for me so that I feel successful in communicating. And I'm aware that there's a lot of time, and I'm aware that I have many talents. I just have to make sure that I'm mindful of, one time, one talent. And to do that, I have to set boundaries. I have to create boundaries so that I can be effective before moving on, because what I strategically try to do is incrementally build. Even when I tried to lose weight, or I shouldn't say try to lose it, even when I did lose weight, my weight loss strategy wasn't to be 1 pound less than I was a week ago. It was to be 1 pound less than I was a year ago. That was setting me up for success, because then I can look back at Vinnie a year ago and say, hey, thanks. Whew. Thanks for setting me up for success, on this one. I try to be a better version of myself in the accumulation, not in the competitive nature. And so much of what we do is as solopreneurs, as people who, aren't working in companies, that don't have a performance review, perhaps, where their boss is telling them how they're doing, or they have, clear metric of success, where as a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, where the opportunities are limitless, but our resources are not. It's hard to understand, what goals are holding us back and what ones are empowering us. And sharing is a great metric of success for me. If people can't share it, for example, if an Academy Award, if an actress or an actor wins an award, or a business wins, best sales, local best sales of the franchise, it's in the sharing that makes it exciting. It's the party afterwards, and the photos and the energy and the purpose, what that means afterwards, that makes it all make sense.
That's very
and I think
true,
that right, it's not about the winning the award. That is that's why award speeches matter, because that's what people often talk about. I can talk, and it's and winning the award isn't what's going to make people talk about it. It's what you do with it. For example, we all know what happened with Taylor Swift and Kanye West during her award, right? Like, we know that he came on stage and kind of took her award, and there's this moment that we all talk about and share globally. We all understand what it's like when, a man comes on stage that's much older than than Taylor Swift was at that time as a teenager, and invaded her space and took that moment and made it his. That's a story. That's something that we can all relate to, and that's something that we'll talk to. And in her strength, by the way, I think it's one of the things that made her globally relatable is we've all been in uncomfortable situations, and we've all been tested to be the best or worst version of ourselves. We've all been put in a situation, where we can be the best. We're represented. You can either do this with grace and dignity, or you can go out with a bang. And it's a great lesson to like sort of look back on, but a shared experience for us all to experienced.
From what you have been telling until now, so how about like if a celebrity is just trying to like improve his or her brand, how to like grow my personal brand actually?
Yeah, it's with the audience. It's all with the audience. It's projects and episodes, books and songs and poems. It's in the things that we create that allow them to share us, right? It goes back to that share. It goes back to share being the universal act. It is creating an opportunity for people to connect together. It is because that is a moment of shared community. That's an experience that they can share between and amongst each other. For me, it's always all about sharing. That's what makes it possible for growth. So let's just be like practical for a second. If I'm sort of holding my face, if there's a finite, if I exist and this is my personal brand, the best way for me to share it is for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 people to see me, to perceive me, to understand the energy, and to share that. And sharing that 1, 2, or 3 times, now there's more awareness of my energy, my goals, the way I do and don't do what I say I'm going to. There's proof of who I am, and there's action that's being made. And there's difference. Hopefully there's difference and impact that's being ignited from the stuff that we're creating. Hopefully it's inspiring content. And it's in sharing it that the space gets bigger, because the community is getting bigger. The audience is getting bigger. There's more awareness of you. There's more conversations. There's more energy. I love recommending to any podcaster out there. I love recommending that you sell hats and t-shirts, and sweatshirts if possible, and fun merch to your audience. It's not about you making $20, $10, $30, whatever. It's not about you making money on a t-shirt. That's exciting about the podcast. Although I love being able to support people who have creative ways of letting me experience their brand. I love wearing hats and sweatshirts and t-shirts to festivals and clubs, and when I'm shopping and when I'm around town, because it gives people an opportunity to maybe connect with me, and maybe they'll say, I listen to that podcast, or I know them, I know that person, or we shop at the same place, or we went to the same school. We like the same team, these shared experiences that I like to sort of throw out there. And I know that if people see that we have a shared experience, there's more opportunity for us to connect. And what I kind of like to lead with is that I think there's a lot more crossover than we're ever possibly even aware of. I know that because I worked in television at a point in time where the TV market expanded rapidly. And what's weird about this, and I don't know how to say this, but what's weird about it is that as the TV market was expanding, the shows that I was connected to or had worked on and had been a part of were the ones that were franchising out and were creating hundreds of episodes and lots of stars and thousands of hours of content. So I felt like I was getting big. I didn't feel like I was getting bigger in the space, because the space was growing, at the same pace that I was growing at as well. Which is why in 2007, when I left MTV Networks and realized how much more digital space had grown, podcasting was of huge interest to mine. The first time I converted a podcast to a TV show was in 2006, and I've been fascinated with the platform ever since. So much so that I finally launched my own podcast called I Have a Podcast, where I sit back and talk to the people that I've, been lucky enough to get to work with, whose careers I may have had an impact on, but certainly have had an impact on mine. and talk about the creative process. And it's opened up some awesome doors and opportunities for me to connect in really meaningful ways, and to not have to go back to work at, a publicly owned media platform, to be able to be as impactful now as I was then, because I'm in a growing industry now. And these podcast episodes, host by host, show by show, series by series, season by season, are the very episodes that are making this podcast industry grow and explode and grow larger and quicker than ever. It's us who are doing it. And I couldn't think of a better time for anyone out there, by the way, to get into podcasting. And hey, I'm not even going to say everyone should be a podcast host. I appreciate you and all the hard work that podcast hosts do to get these episodes out, and the research and the editing and the publishing. I mean, it is a job, and it is my language. So I show up. It's my language. I speak, host, but everyone out there could be a podcast guest. You do not need to have a podcast to be a podcast guest. And there's no better form of content that I can tell you to make right now as a business owner than to be a podcast guest. That I should be lucky enough that this episode is going to obviously inspire a podcast episode, maybe even a couple of social media network posts, maybe even a blog or two. Maybe I'm going to be added into a newsletter somewhere. Maybe there's going to be some quotes that come out of this content. It's going to be some energy that we create. I know it because I'm putting it in. And if it's in there, if it's in the alchemy of the content, then I know for a fact that when it hits the audience, it'll be there. It's evident. I know this for a fact. It's true. It's 25-year career in this industry of being creative. And if anything, it's all about the audience. So you're looking to grow your brand, look at the audience, look at the best way to give them more materials, more opportunities to share, and be inspired by the actions that they take in response to the actions that you take. Make sure you give yourself enough space and grace to not stop, but to turn around and look and understand how your content is impacting, your audience. It's important to have fortitude and drive the conversation and have a point of view and, be steadfast in who you are. But these podcasts are not just monologue vehicles. They really are an awesome way to listen to your audience. It's just not the way that you may be used to, because social media gives us some instant satisfaction, gratification, or whatever you want to call it, in the forms of likes and dislikes and such. But the relationship between podcaster and audience is a special one. And it's something that the podcaster owns. Nick Cannon doesn't own Mile and Out. The Osbournes don't own Wasbournes. Ashton Kutcher doesn't own Punked. A TV network does. And I think the difference between now and then is that this is the intellectual property that you can own, and there's power in that.
That's actually true. And I was just thinking of telling something, but I just went into the deep conversation of yours. But actually, as you told, podcasts bring a lot of deep connection with the host and like the podcast show and the audience. As a listener of various podcasts, which made me to become a podcaster, and I thought this voice of us is very much intimate with the audience. So they just hear our ideas and hear what we tell with, like, they don't get distracted. Like if we are watching a YouTube video, we'll be just distracted and we'll pause the video and leave. But with this podcast thing, audience just put their headphones and start listening to the voice, and they get like attracted to the voice and attracted to the value we bring to the table. As you said, we podcasters are like the TV shows of early days. Is that true? Am I telling it right?
Absolutely true. It's absolutely true. Except we own our shows. We have so much,
So,
and here's something else. When I was in TV, I remember there being a lot of like new cable networks popping up, and then there were, a lot of,
mm,
kind of went from like 20 channels, kind of went from like 20 channels to 150 channels, maybe during my time in TV, and then in 2007, it quickly got to the thousands when the digital. How many podcasts do you know of that have been launched? How many episodes do you know that have been created versus how many platforms have been launched? There's a real need for content that there is I can name more platforms than podcasts that have come out in the last 10 years.
very
Just
true, very
especially
true.
even
That's
just
very
on my
true.
Apple TV. Although, I can name more platforms than actual podcasts. And every show has a podcast. So, it's, there's this news cycle. There's a cycle, when you watch a show on TV tends to be reported on by the news department of that network. And there's a lot of reciprocity between that media. So the future of us content owners who own our intellectual property, and podcasts being one of them, is just the beginning of how we'll be able to continue to make money and own our stories and leverage, this creator economist kind of space, the economy space that we're in right now.
Absolutely. We are the showrunners and the show owners of all the content we produce. Before hitting the record, we were just talking about the Emmy award which you got. So tell us more about how a business owner, a media advisor, got an Emmy award, which is like new to me. Actually, I haven't heard anyone getting an Emmy for being a media advisor.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
how that happened?
Yeah, thank you very much. By the way, and I'm recording this episode right now of this podcast in my guest bedroom, which is where I was forced to work out of during the pandemic. I worked in TV for 25 years, on film and on set. I worked in unscripted shows and in people's homes and shooting documentaries. I was able to win my Emmy from this room right here. Executive producers on shows have many different skill sets. I was brought into a project to help with distribution and amplification and ways to help it stand out. I wasn't the person that needed to come in with the idea. There was the person who already had the idea was already in place, and the person who was already, a full team was in place already. But I wanted an Emmy. I got to be honest. I wanted an Emmy. After 25 years of working in TV, I wanted an Emmy. I wanted an Emmy because when people hear that you have an Emmy award and then they connect it to the amount of time that I've worked in TV, there's this sort of, it feels like there's this prestigious sort of thing that comes, it sounds impressive and it sounds interesting. And even though I have amazing shows and I couldn't be prouder of the actual work, that I've done, it just puts this halo, like the Angel's halo effect over my catalog of work that I've done. And I realized that I hadn't won an Emmy because I'd never applied for one. And I was shook. I was like, that's literally the reason why I've never won an Emmy, is because I never even qualified to be one. Like the shows that I'd worked on, there was no casting Emmy when I was casting reality TV. There was producer Emmys for those types of shows, but not in casting. So I had a unique job and a unique position, but it didn't qualify me for, that award. So I actually took a step back and I looked at the qualifications of the Emmy Awards. You have to pay to be considered. It has to air in a certain territory. It has to be a certain length. There needs to be a certain subject matter or context, or so. Long story short, with knowing that I had this sort of goal in mind, when I saw an opportunity to work on the right project, that happened to be with Brandon T. Adams and his wife Samantha, and also Kevin Harrington and Jeff Hoffman, like two amazing people that I couldn't be prouder to have won my first Emmy, side by side with those two guys. And It's a subject about a person who comes out of rehab, and it's the red flags that may show up, the first 6 to 8 weeks out of rehab. So most television shows or media started with some type of like intervention and then ended with them going into rehab, and that's usually where the episode ended. And I thought it was important to be part of something that focused on how this person comes out of rehab and how they get acclimated back to life and how we have to reacclimate to them. It's a subject matter that is close to my heart because I went through it with my parents and spent a lot of hours in therapy helping myself and them through decisions that I didn't get to make for myself, but took control over my narrative and took control of my story. And it's, in that trauma and in those things that happen in life that allow us to have superpowers, so I'm just lucky. I'm lucky I didn't have to get bit by a spider to get my superpower. I'm not saying it was easy by any sense of the world, but I just like to bring that up because I know it's not. I know how hard it is to have no money and no opportunity and be told you're not talented and to be told to stop doing things and I know what that feels like. That's happened to me my entire life. That's why I felt like compelled to create my own version of opportunities and realities, and why relationships with people matter more to me than the projects that are at stake. And my whole career and life are kind of that's the strategy. I have no content strategy. My life strategy is to make content. So I don't have a content strategy, and I'd love to help people get there to build an awareness of what you're doing so that you don't have to worry about changing the headlines to make it SEO-ified, that you should be living your life. I love inspire and I love impact and I love ignite. I love those words. What I don't do is wait till it's about to hit Google for me to use them. I make sure that I use those words in everything that I talk about because those are my favorite words. Those are the words I want to be surrounded by. So I have to use them. And this is something I learned from helping people change their lives on reality television, as well as through podcasting and just through creative communication as well. So that being said, everything I'm talking about, I have it all on my website. Everything that I've talked about has documentation. So I have something that's called the Creator Hub, and it is free for entrepreneurs and business owners, people like you who may want to be on a podcast or own a podcast. Go to vpe.tv. That's my website. And you'll see a ton of documentation. How to get your podcast on IMDb. Over 100 awards worthy of winning. I've even got, for people who are like, how do I get paid from a podcast? How do I make money? I've got over 50 platforms I'm telling you to put your name on. I put my name on the list, and on a marketing, something called an influencer marketing platform or a creator marketing platform. And I get picked every other month. I make a couple of $100 to a couple of $1,000 depending on what it is. But my name's on a list. I tell people I'm open for opportunity. And it's called a creator marketing platform. I've got over 50 of them. And I urge you to go to vpe.tv to download my list, start registering so you can be successful in making money and sustaining the message behind your podcasting and your business and your services and your products. And I appreciate this. And thank you so much for the space, bud.
That was a very insightful conversation today. It gives more value to our audience from Vinnie. It was a pleasure having you, Vinnie. And I actually will be in, we'll have another show again, so we can talk more on what are the latest things we have to do on producing content and stuff.
Yeah, let's do more in 2020. Yes, I appreciate that. And yeah, let's do more. That's a great lesson to learn, by the way. And anyone who's listening to this too, it's a great lesson to learn. We spend so much time making connections just to make the connection. I really appreciate the follow-up. And if we've done it once and it's been great, we can do it again. That's the easiest part. Thank you for that.
Okay, Vinny. Thank you for being on my show. And thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening or watching my show. Subscribe to my channel, like and share it to everyone who wants to 2x their business.